Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Social Media Church podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Aaron Magnuson, not joined today by the other co-host, Nils Smith, but we are joined today by a mutual friend and one of the most influential people in the kingdom building space online. And today is going to be a really practical episode, and we cannot wait to share it with you and dive right in. And I also want to say this up top. It might be a conversation that you've heard before and that you've heard elsewhere, that maybe in one season of your life you weren't ready to execute upon, but I promise, go all the way through this podcast with us. And on the other end of it, you're going to have 7 practical steps to being able to leverage your sermon in ways you didn't even dream possible. I'm really excited about it because our leaders work so hard each and every week to create content, and we are tired of seeing it fall flat after a day and maybe one podcast listen during the week. We want to actually take that really great content that you spent so much time and effort and prayers into, see that go as far as it can digitally. And so today, to talk about that, we are joined by the founder of Ministry Pass, Justin Trapp. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Aaron, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
We're so excited to have you. And I know, I want to say this up top too, Nils really wanted to be here. Nils regrettably had a last minute trip that came up. And I know for sure Nils wanted to be here just to stare at that Texans poster you have and the Texans mascot. Ooh, and a little bit of the Texans helmet. If you're not watching on YouTube, I would highly recommend go to our YouTube channel and watch this podcast. So, oh yeah, and you're even getting the tour here. Justin is a massive Texans fan. He's got an Astros corner as well. And so that is definitely where Nils and Justin connect, in addition to all things social media and church ministry. So Justin, we just wanted to jump in and talk about the things that you're most passionate about and really what you've been leading the space in here for ministries. And that is talking about how we can utilize our sermons that we're creating each and every week and take it further. Do you want to kind of introduce, well, maybe you're not new to the podcast, but some of our new members may be new to you. So do you want to start by maybe introducing yourself and letting us know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I grew up wanting to be in ministry. I don't know if anybody else says that, but as an 11-year-old boy,
wow,
I felt God tapped me on the shoulder. And so it's almost like I became an old soul in the church pretty quickly. I volunteered at our church all the time. They had to create rules so I couldn't be at the church during the day because I was homeschooled. And so I sort of worked towards that, right? And I went to seminary and just wanted to serve the Lord. And then, man, I was following the plan, right? You're a youth pastor and you're going to be a church planner or a senior pastor. You have this pathway, so to speak. And my pastor sat me down. Of course, I was full-time vocationally, and then I ended up being bivocationally, and I was doing some consulting and some coaching in the business realm with communications and marketing. And my pastor sat me down, and we had talked about me planning a church or me planning a campus for our mother church. Mm-hmm. And he said, listen, he actually didn't sat me down. We were driving, and he said, listen, something I've been thinking about and I wanted to share with you. I think that you would be a fine local pastor. I really do. I think you'd be great. But it is apparent to me that God continues to bless you and give you influence via business. And I think that your contribution to the kingdom will be much greater in business than it will be as you being a pastor. Again, you'd be a great pastor, but it's just something to consider. And I hadn't thought about that, Aaron. It just sort of caught me off guard.
Wow.
And man, it wasn't 15 months later, he was completely right. And, I sort of launched Ministry Pass about 8 years ago. And Ministry Pass we are a platform. We have over 1,500 sermon series. We have a sermon series on every book of the Bible. And if you add all of our content up, it's about 75 years worth of content. So our team has worked really hard the last 8 years, and we have a tremendous time serving the local church. So I feel like I'm still able to, fulfill that calling that God had on me as an 11-year-old boy, and I get to serve the local church and hang out with pastors. So, I live the dream, so to speak.
That's incredible. And I want to stay here for a second. This is not what we intended to talk about, but my curiosity is going off right now. And I want to ask a question regarding how your pastor gave you that information. because we might have leaders here that have a Justin on their team right now. Maybe they're employed, maybe they're just serving as a volunteer. I want to applaud your pastor first and foremost. That takes a lot to take somebody who is so gifted and more than gifted, also interested in going into ministry, and to have that conversation, knowing that you're not going to be able to utilize them for yourself, not again, taking the kingdom out of this, but for yourself, which all ministry leaders know we're always looking for high capacity, business minded leaders within our local church to continue to serve, to continue to help. And so I'm curious, what was your initial reaction to him delivering that news to you? Did it crush your dreams?
I was confused. It was sort of out of left field. And Marty, he is actually my youth pastor as a kid.
Wow.
So we had a very close relationship.
Lots of trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of trust. And I was going, what is happening here? And I told my wife, I said, does he want us to leave? Am I a nuisance in his side? Which was not the case, because when I did talk to him, we launched Ministry Pass, and 8 months later, I had a foot in two boats, right? One in each boat, and the waters were just rocky. It's hard to have balance in life when you have 1 foot in this boat and 1 foot in that boat. And I just had to say, hey, listen, I've got to step down on staff here because it's just too much, and you're right. And of course, he didn't want to talk. He actually avoided the conversation for about 3 weeks. So
wow.
I don't think he wanted me to leave. That's why he shared that with me. But I have to hand it to him. It was very wise on his part, sort of an observation, and I'm glad that he said it to me, because I might not be, I would say, fulfilling my purpose, I would say, to the kingdom, if he hadn't. I may have just been on that path, and
right,
because that's what everyone's supposed to do. And so I'm thankful he had the openness and the creativity to say, hey, I think you might consider this.
Yes. And the relational equity, honestly, and pastors should understand this better than anybody. Having these conversations is really important, and they go a lot better when you have relational equity with the people that you're leading. Just to stay here just for a moment longer, Marty, and we don't want to speak on Marty's behalf, but what were a few things that you think Marty did really well? Because the reason I'm asking this question is for all of you leaders, this is free game right here. This is not even what we intended to talk about. If you have somebody like Justin that you're like, oh, God's kind of prompting me right now, like I should have a similar conversation with this individual. I see these things. I see how God's hand is on their life. What did Marty do really well to set himself up well after a potential, like, hey, I'm inviting this person to go pursue something that is going to initially hurt my staff? What was something Marty did really well, and how did he lead you, Justin, in that to successfully offboard from full-time ministry into pursuing what Marty saw in you?
Well, I'll say this: if anybody that knows Marty knows this of him, he's a long game kind of guy, right? So he's playing the long game. He's really good at planting seeds. And all of a sudden you have this epiphany personally, right? And you're like, man, I should go do this, without realizing Marty's been planting seeds in conversations for 10 months, right?
Yep.
And Marty, maybe he had been planting seeds and I just wasn't, paying attention. That conversation was not a planting seed conversation. It was sort of an abrupt, like, hey, you might consider doing something different. But I would say, generally speaking, Marty is just really good at getting people, influencing people long term, whether it's recruitment or sending people out. I have great respect and admiration for Marty. I will say, when I left, it was a little, bumpy, I would say, because I don't think he was ready for me to leave. He had told me to leave, and then, he thought I should consider something else, and then when it blew up, literally overnight almost, we both had to sort of learn through that season. So.
Yes. And was there, last thing on this, because I think because fear is what's going to stop leaders who know that they have a Justin. They know they need to have this conversation. Fear is what's going to stop them. What happened for Marty on the other side after you left?
I think Marty's a great recruiter. He's a great developer. And so he replaced me just fine with I was like his right-hand man. I think anytime you lose your you can lose anybody, right? But when you lose your right-hand man, it feels different. And he replaced me with a guy that is still there and seems to
Wow.
be thriving and doing great there today. So I'm happy for that.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really just important to hear these stories and that God provides. And ultimately, if it is for the kingdom, it's going to provide on both sides. And clearly with Ministry Pass, that has provided for you and provided for all of these churches that have benefited from Ministry Pass. Do you want to just talk about Ministry Pass a little bit? How people can join. We are such a fan. I want to be clear to our audience as well. We don't bring people on the podcast that we don't believe in what they're doing. And so we freely celebrate and encourage you to engage with whether it's a product, whether it's a book. We don't always have people that are coming on with this representation on the podcast, but when they are, it's something that we at the Social Media Church Podcast believe in, support, and value. And so you can find links to all of this stuff in the description of this, whether you're watching on YouTube with video or wherever you're listening to the podcast. But do you want to let people know a little bit about what Ministry Pass is? Then they're going to have a framework for the conversation that we're about to have.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier, Ministry Pass is a library of sermon series resources. We have media resources as well. But our really aim, Aaron, is to help the pastor at the smaller church with limited resources, limited staff. Maybe you're bivocational, you're a church planner, you're the only person on staff. It's a church revitalization effort. Resources and time you don't have, right? I was a bivocational pastor during this time with Marty, and that was one thing I didn't have. I didn't have a lot of time, but I'm preaching once or twice a month, and I'm doing all the creatives and the media stuff. And if I can save 4 hours a week, man, that actually makes a huge difference. What we wanted to do is we wanted to provide pastors the media assets for any sermon series or events you might need, but also the sermon content framework. So we're not actually giving pastors, we're not writing your sermons for you, but we are giving you this sort of content framework where we're giving you the passage to use, the talking point ideas, some sermon illustration ideas.
Wow.
Some of those types of, I would say, the building blocks, and then you develop it through your own unique voice for your own unique community from there. But we've given you the starting place. And so we've been working hard to serve pastors for the past 8 years, and it's just been a great joy. So we're getting ready to launch our sermon calendars. We want to launch a topical calendar every year, so it's a 52-week sermon roadmap.
Wow.
We do that every October 5th this year. So we have a topical roadmap. We have an expository, so if you just prefer to work through books of the Bible. We have a lectionary, and we have a youth and a kids. And then this year, we're actually doing 2 calendars, Aaron, that are really interesting. We're doing a 52-week walk through Matthew, and then a 52-week walk through the book of Exodus. So we have 7 calendars this year. It's actually a lot, but that's sort of, I would say, the most popular resource that people get excited about, pastors get excited about, is to see what our calendars look like when we release them in October.
Huge value add. Huge. And time is our most valuable commodity. And if we're able to take some of our resources, especially when those resources are realistic for a medium to small size church budget, that can be a huge value add. So yeah, check out Ministry Pass. Thanks for sharing that, Justin. Now let's talk, this is going to apply to everybody. Let's talk about this 7-point framework about how we can take the major main stage piece of content that's created every single week, which is our sermons, and how we can leverage that for more than just the moment in which it's preached. I'll let you jump in wherever you want to take it, and then I'm sure I'm going to have some questions to represent our audience off the back of this.
Yeah, so let's back up to COVID. COVID hit.
Yeah.
And a lot of churches were forced, literally overnight, to adopt new ways of publishing, essentially, right?
Yep.
Publishing a service or presenting a service. You're having to do it online because, we've been shut down, or we can't have service, or everyone remembers that. And I was really inspired, and I was really encouraged by just churches pivoted on a dime. They did. And the church world itself, we're so slow to change. And some of these changes that we made post-COVID, we should have made 7-8 years ago, right? Right. However, I do think there is, churches and pastors I talk to have been working really hard ever since then to shore up and to, have a digital strategy in place. But I do think there's some things that we can do, right? I'm reminded of of the story where the disciples have been fishing all night, and Jesus says, "Hey, you catch anything?" And they're like, "No," but they're tired. They've been working. They've been fishing all night, and he says, "Hey, no, you're just you're in the right area. Just move your nets over a little bit." And I think that's my hope is like what I'm trying to say today is like, hey, everyone's working hard. We're trying to reach people with the good news. We're in the right area. Let's just pivot a little bit. And I think we might actually find that you're going to have a lot more success when it comes to a digital strategy. And here's part of the I think the main issue that I have, Aaron.
Yep.
And you know this, right? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, and all the others, right? These are all platforms that prioritize and reward short form bite-sized content.
Yep.
So we're watching 7-second videos, 20-second video, 30-second video. Never have I ever watched an hour and a half long video or a 45-minute sermon on Instagram. It just doesn't happen.
Nope.
But when COVID hit, what did we do as churches? We thought, oh, well, we can't meet in person, so let's just publish long-form content, an hour and a half long service or a 45-minute sermon on Facebook, on Twitter. We're posting the link right to the message. And it's not that we shouldn't do that, but that can't be like our only digital strategy. So
correct.
My hope is to sort of go through some really practical seven things that I think you can do to take the sermon and repurpose it to where you can create bite-sized, short-form content that is really suited for how people already consume content on those platforms.
That we want to be delivering things to people in the way that they're consuming it, not trying to bring them I think not trying to even bring them to our building. The only place we're going to pastor you is if you give us 1 hour on Sunday right here in this physical location. And I don't think anybody would articulate it that way, but to your point, sometimes our actions communicate that. And then we're actually not leveraging something that actually doesn't take, it's moving the nets to the other side of the boat, something that doesn't take that much extra work. But what happens, the nets break, the boat sinks because we're actually having an impact on these people just because we move the nets to the other side. So let's jump into number one. What is the first thing that our pastors and leaders can do when they're thinking about this framework?
So the first thing you can do is you can repurpose your sermon into blogs. And here's how you do that.
Ooh. Are blogs still relevant, Justin?
So I think blogs can be very relevant, right?
Yep.
You have Substack. Substack is essentially a blog on a new platform. That's all it is, right? It's an article. It's a blog. So what you can do, this is really easy. You can go to rev.com and you can pay. You can upload your sermon. You can upload your sermon video or your sermon audio to rev.com, and they will transcribe the whole thing for you.
Yep.
Now you have your entire sermon manuscript out, and you can take that and you can say, hey, let's say you have 3 points in your message, Pastor. Well, the first point, you probably have an illustration in there somewhere. You probably have an applicational point and probably have some sort of passage reference. Wow, that's a great blog post for a Monday morning, right?
Straight away. Great for your website. Great. That's rev.com. I've used Rev. They're a fantastic service. And yes, there's multiple things you can use just even on that transcript alone. We're probably going to get into that. But blog post number one, great for your website, more content. Some people like to read. Newsflash. Some people don't want to watch or listen, but they're happy to read. Great.
Right. So, and let me say this about sermons. We should back up. Writing a sermon is an arduous journey. It is, on average, pastors spend 10.5 hours working on their sermon every single week. Yep. They'll spend more time working on their sermon than they will eating their meals, right?
It's crazy.
And then, and then they're doing it 40 plus times a year. And what happens generally with that sermon? It goes up online. It goes on a podcast, like a link somewhere to the full sermon. And then it's there, and that's it. And, you know, your work as a pastor for that sermon is a dense endeavor. Like, that is a dense piece of content, a sermon, 45-minute presentation. There is so much there that you can utilize that we're going to talk about. So number one is blogs. Number two is quotes. I mean, this is sort of easy, right? But go just do a search on Instagram for scriptures. Right?
Yes.
And you'll find all these profiles. all
Yep.
they do is literally go to unsplash.com or
Yep.
Google image, beautiful landscape, and then put a scripture or a quote over the top. And they have like hundreds of thousands of followers. Why? Because people love seeing
They do.
beautiful imagery and
Yep.
things that encourage them.
That's right. Pinterest too. Can't forget about Pinterest. I know some of the best social media managers at churches and organizations I know have discovered Pinterest has incredible organic reach. And it's quotes, inspirational, like you're creating inspiration.
Yeah, so every point that you make could be a quote. Easy. Every passage that you use could be
Totally.
Sort of an image quote, so to speak. You're quoting scripture. Like that is easy, right there. I mean, you could do it yourself.
Totally.
You could do a volunteer. Use Canva. To me, that's
Yeah.
one of the easiest things.
Totally.
Number 3 is you want to repurpose your messages to videos. Now, we have this already, right? Oops, sorry.
You're good.
You want to repurpose your videos, your messages to videos. And what I mean by
Right.
that is actually bite-sized videos. It's a mega church here. Of course, in Texas, Houston.
Yeah.
Lots of mega
We say which one? Yeah.
right? There's lots of mega churches. But this is a cowboy mega church.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a large cowboy mega church. You would think a church has an outdoor area, maybe volleyball nets like the youth group. This church has a rodeo arena, right? And so
Epic.
what they're really good at, though, their pastor is a great storyteller. So what they'll do, I see it all the time. They will take a 2-minute story from his message, or it doesn't have to be a story, but usually it is a story with an applicational point at the end, right? And they've uploaded it on Facebook, and they run some ads to it, and people share that story. And he's a great storyteller, right? And so I think most pastors are great storytellers. So
Yep.
take that. You're not trying to post the whole message. You're trying to post a 2-minute clip, a 1-minute clip with some sort of applicational point or some sort of point at the end, and you publish that out there. People will interact with that far more. The engagement will be much greater on that than it would be your full-length sermon. And it's because
Yep.
again, people are used to just consuming
Totally.
bite-sized content.
And more people might be likely to consume it online that way. They may have even attended on Sunday or Saturday, depending on when your services are, but they might be more likely to find that again on Instagram or TikTok than watching it on YouTube in full length. So again, it's not even that people are more committed on Instagram. It's not anything about that. It's just it's switching the nets, right? I'm so glad you started with this illustration. It's just we're moving the nets to the other side because they're already there.
Yep. Number 4 is converting your sermons to podcasts. Now, I know a lot of churches use the default, like you record the sermon and it automatically uploads a podcast. That's not what I'm talking about, actually. So there's a church in our area. The podcast is not hosted by the pastor. The podcast is hosted by a few of the pastors on the preaching team.
Wow.
What they do is they take the pastor's notes, sort of the editing floor, right? And they go and they do like a 15-minute, 20-minute podcast episode talking about the sermon, but going a little bit deeper, going a little bit into more of the nuances of the points that the pastor was making, or the passage, or the historical, or the background, or the context of what the writer was saying, right? What Paul was saying in the
Yep.
New Testament in this particular passage. So I thought that was really interesting. It's almost like a behind the scenes or a deeper dive.
Yep.
And you could do something like that really, really easy with
Totally.
a pastor on staff. Maybe you don't have someone that could do that, but you could do that yourself. You could say, hey,
Totally.
here's what I was thinking. Here's the points that I made. And it could be almost like a 7-8 minute podcast. But
Yeah.
again, it doesn't have to be the full length sermon, but
That's right.
you've already done the work.
Yep. Totally. And the interesting part about that too is you're introducing new voices into the thoughts that the pastor had. And so you're actually, it's kind of twofold there. You're not only are you creating a new content stream, you're also creating a new thought stream around the same topics, which the reality is we connect with people, not brands, right? The same is true for your church. As much as that's hard to hear, as much it's not your logo, it's not your church, it's not even the name of your church. The bigger deal is the people. And so when you're introducing more people into the conversation, into the media, you're more likely to get more of those fish in the net that are, oh, well, I really enjoyed this person's perspective and I retained it better. Because maybe it was a female talking about it. Maybe it was, or maybe it was the pastor's husband talking about it. If it's led by a female church, it just, the new voices, that's what people connect with. And when you're presenting the content in a new way with new thoughts, again, same premise, same kind of meat, but what you're presenting it is in a different way with different voices. You actually create engagement that way. So I love that point. That's a huge point, and not a heavy lift. Again, not a heavy lift. It's just, it could be 8 minutes, and it could be a mic recorded on Zoom. Like, it could be a recorded Zoom call. Like, we're not talking, of course, go big if you can go big, but we're not talking about things here that are like, go out and spend $1,000, get a kit, get a studio, et cetera, and then you can do it. No, you just flip. I mean, you could probably even record it on your phone. We all know the iPhone mics are great. You can probably record those thoughts on your phone, upload it somewhere. But yeah, that is a great one, Justin.
Yeah, so that's number 4. Number 5 is to take your sermons and repurpose it for small group curriculum, small group material. Now, this one is really easy, Aaron, because here's what we do at Ministry Pass. Most sermons, right? Almost all sermons, they work to resolve something. They make points, definitive points about the gospel or about how we should live our lives. What you can do with small group curriculum, small group content, is you're really wanting to facilitate conversation. So you're really wanting any small group content that you have should be questions, not answers.
Yep.
And so what you do is you take the answer, the direct point from your message. Let's say you have 3 points or 5 points, however it is, and you reverse engineer all of those points. Those aha statements that you've made, reverse engineer those and turn those into questions. So you're not giving people the answers in small groups. You're giving them the questions.
Yes.
And letting them work through that together as a group.
Wow.
It's a really easy way. In Ministry Pass, we provide small group questions and content for all of our sermon series. So, if you use Ministry Pass, you have that already. But if you're a church that doesn't, you can create your own small group content. Yep. You don't have to use another platform or watch a video, for 25 minutes and then talk through it. Everyone silently watches this video for 20 minutes. You can actually just work through the same content that your pastor is preaching, but do it in a way that I think is easy and is practical.
Love it. Point number 6.
Number 6. So here's one of my favorite ones. So this is to take your sermons and turn them into free resources.
Ooh.
Now everyone gives away the sermon for free, right? On your messages page, so to speak. But what I think that churches should do, Aaron, you know this, right? The business world does this. We create free resources. We say, hey, you just stop by our website. Here's a free resource. Ministry Pass, we do this all the time. Here's a free sermon series. All you have to do is give us your email address, and we'll send you this free resource. What this allows you to do is it allows you to follow up with these people, whoever wanted that resource, and to build trust with them, to connect with them. And this is really important, I think, for churches to utilize and adopt this strategy. Because check this out. Let's say you do a series. Pastor, you've preached 3 sermon series on marriage the past 5 years. You can take all that content, make it into a marriage devotional series, a 1-week devotional series for couples, right? Have it on your homepage, free resource, marriage devotional for couples, 1 week. Now when someone sends that, you know something about them. No longer are they this anonymous, unique visitor in your Google Analytics. Now you know this is actually a person that's married, right? And they want to improve their marriage.
That's
now
right.
you can follow up with them through the context of how you entered that relationship digitally with them. You can say, hey, you had this resource. You can the first 3 emails you send them can be about strengthening your marriage. What does the Bible say about marriage? All of those things. And then, right, you've built trust. You've added value to their marriage. You've added value to their life. And they have never even watched a stream or attended a service.
That's it.
To me, that is so powerful.
It is. And to your point, Justin, it doesn't take a lot of extra work. And this is one of the things that I would love to see churches do a better job of. And to your point, the Market Space does a really great job of this, where you have a free resource that pops up on your website as an email capture. And I would love to see churches graduate from capturing emails through, I'm new here. There's no transaction there. That's only an ask. That is now people want to be connected, right? So that's a transaction. I shouldn't say there's no transaction, but how much more of a response would you get if, hey, here is this free resource that we have. We're in the middle of this series. Transact an email, give them, and then you're actually identifying those people, because I know from being an online pastor, identifying digital people that are anonymous or just an analytic, we know that they're out there. We know that they're real, but until they choose to identify themselves to us, we're not able to interact with them. And having a free resource like that on your website that is giving them value first, and then you're actually able to identify them, follow up with them. This is a step I would love to see churches take. So I love it that you're thinking about, hey, how can we actually turn this sermon series into a free resource? And then you actually have a rotating, well, not only would you have a library, but you would also have a rotating, to keep your website fresh, a rotating free resource every new sermon series you jump into.
Yeah, I honestly think there should be free resources all over church websites. You could take
of course
curriculum. If you have your children's ministry page, which every church does, right? You have 5 Bible stories to share with your kids. If they opt into that, now you know they're a parent. They want to teach their kids about the gospel, and you can highlight the children's ministry.
Totally.
A lot of churches, and we've done this, right? I'm going to sound overly critical here, but we've sort of we've adopted the plan your visit model, and said, hey, we've done a good job, and that's like a neat gadget. Planning your visit is like the 5th step. Not the first step. It's the 5th step. There's this progression that happens where people are not aware of your church. They're kind of aware. They're curious. They're interested. They're engaged. This is a growth that has to happen before they ever attend your services.
That's right.
You can facilitate that growth, and you can facilitate it a lot faster utilizing these resources. So again, I'm really passionate about this one, because I think it's like there's lots of fish in the water, and if we just move our nets a little bit, the boats will be overflowing.
I can see why this one was your favorite. I would also say that I think that's really important. I want to stay here for just a second longer. The plan your visit being our best foot forward, not only is it down in the funnel, but I was even thinking as you were talking, an engaged member, let's even call them a member, may actually never plan a visit to go to your church. They could live somewhere else. We've all learned, right? This is the post-COVID model, right? They might live somewhere else. They might even live across the street, and they have no intention of going to plan a visit. And so we must do better as pastors, shepherding people with what we're doing. Now, keep the plan a visit, party on. Like, that's great. That's awesome. Don't lose that. But what we're talking about is, if that's what you think is the value add, hey, we're going to give you a tour, or like we're going to help you get to our church. That is not the transactional currency that is going to work best to actually start that relationship and start pastoring the people that are engaging with you online. Yeah.
So that's number 6. Number 7, Aaron, is the hardest one to do, but I think it's powerful. And it's taking your sermon series, and turning it into a book.
Ooh.
Here's why I think it's powerful.
Tell us how we do it, Justin.
Have you ever read a book about, let's just say, a famous person? You knew. Like, I read a autobiography on Brett Favre, The Gunslinger is the book. Right? Read about LeBron, or I read about Steve Jobs. And you know them from pop cultural, and you've seen them on the news. But when you read their story, there's something that happens where you knew that they're famous, and you knew that they were smart, but all of a sudden you understand the resilience that is in them from their experiences in life, the hardships they went through. There's this respect that is gained, this newfound perception of them, right? If someone's, let's say, trust is a currency in our culture. I think it's
huge.
Let's say you have a new family coming to your church. How many visits does it take for them to fully trust your church?
Right.
What I mean by trust is, how many visits does it take for them, brand new, to come in and be fully engaged in worship, to not be skeptical of the pastor, to not be worried about little Johnny and little Susie in kids' church and nursery? Like, how many visits?
That's right.
Is it 6 visits? Is it 10 visits? And if they're coming once a month, is that 10 months?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Well, I know the statistics used to show that it took 7 for them to even just enter your door. Now I've heard that's gone up to 9. So if we're talking about 9 touch points before they even enter your door, to your point, how much more till they trust after they've entered the door?
Now check this out. Let's say you have a sermon series on redemption, right? Maybe, Pastor, you have a personal testimony of redemption, and you write, you take this series, and there are services out there where you can pay them, your church can pay them to write this book with you. So they take all of the sermon content that you already had, and they sort of help you craft and lay out a book, and you can do it at whatever level you want, right? So let's say you take this book and you give this book to you give it to everybody in the church, but you also give it to every new person that walks through the door, right? This story of redemption. What do you do with this story? Not only do you weave your story of redemption in it, but you weave the story of the church, your purpose, your mission, your values. And let's just say this is an anecdotal example, right? Let's just say the couple, they're new, they're going on vacation, they take the book with them, the wife sits down on the beach for 2 days, and she pours through it. Now she feels like she knows a lot about the pastors, she knows a lot about the church history, she knows a lot about the purpose, the values. Like, you have accelerated the trust building process to a small window. Like, it is just so powerful to me what can happen if somebody is able to take your sermon series, turn it into a book, and then someone sits down and reads that book. Everyone gains so much from that experience. So
that's right.
Again, it's not the easiest of all these. It's probably the hardest, probably the most expensive, but to me, it is the most powerful.
Now, there's a hybrid too here, right? That we can talk about almost a step between, let's call it 6.5. And that hybrid would be create an ebook. Don't even worry about publishing it. Don't worry about the physical copies. We're giving away a free book, not a resource, a free book on our website, and the value add instantly goes up there as well. And I know it's only been easier in 2022 to publish something like an ebook but the hard part is the content. But we just talked about how much content, Pastor, that's listening, you've created. And now it's just setting aside some time to gather those thoughts and make a book. I am curious, Justin, not to put you on the spot. We didn't talk about this ahead of time, but do you have kind of a first step? Let's say, oh yeah, I want to make a book. That makes perfect sense. I'm sold. What is that first step somebody could take in the journey of writing a book outside of gathering the content, like a practical step in terms of, I don't even know that process of getting a book published, et cetera, et cetera. I know it's a lot of steps, but what would you recommend that first step be?
I'd say reach out to, there's a few services out there. There's Lucid Publishing.
Okay.
He's a pastor, and he started this publishing company. They're here. It was about an hour away from where we're at here in Houston, but I know they help pastors all over. sermontobook.com, I believe. Again, I'm not really affiliated with any of these, but I do know that these are services that
this is great
can help you. Yeah, sermontobook.com, and then Lucid Publishing. I think it's lucidpublishing.com as well. They can help you. And there's also kind of book writing workshops, right? So I would take a look at that. But find a series that you have a lot of material on. Maybe you've preached on the same topic a few times.
Yeah.
It gives you, let's say 10 weeks or 8 weeks of content to go through. I think that's plenty.
Totally.
To write a book, honestly.
Absolutely. And most pastors, all the pastors I know, have that one topic or that one subject matter that they're most passionate about. And the reason they're most passionate about it is because it's a personal story. And so if you're needing help thinking of it, it's probably the passage of scripture or the sermon series that you love every time it comes up on your sermon calendar, and figuring out how can I inject a lot of myself and my family and the history of our church into this. And then all of a sudden you have enough content for a book. Wow, Justin, those 7 are like incredible. And I love it that the majority of, I love 2 things. The majority of them you can take action on. It's literally dragging the nets to the other side of the boat. And the other thing that I love is that it wasn't one step, hey, take your content, snip it up, and distribute it on all these different platforms, which I think is probably the majority of the ways that we have heard this message as church leaders presented to us of like, oh, your sermon doesn't just have to be on YouTube. It can be in all these places as 2-minute clips. That's certainly a part of this strategy, but you gave us practical handles that go outside of just chopping up that piece of media that are actionable. And most of these too could be handled by a trusted volunteer. Because I bet you have somebody in your church that is passionate about writing and would be happy to figure out how to take your sermons into a blog. You might even be able to circumvent the process of rev.com and just have somebody that's taking really great notes that also wants to publish this on your church's behalf as a blog. And so then you're starting to involve the church body, right, in creating new volunteer opportunities, creating new opportunities for people to be invested in the church and in the message. Which means they're more likely to share it as well. And so you're creating all of this engagement just based off of the 10 hours at least amount of work that you've put in to crafting your sermon. Justin, anything else as we kind of wrap up this podcast that you want to leave us with?
No, I think, it goes back to my original thoughts that I think pastors and church leaders are doing the work. I don't think anybody's not doing the work.
That's right.
Should have an open mind about what we do and how we do it in this era, right? In this, this landscape that is changing rapidly, and be open to new methods, and know and be assured that, hey, that the message is not really changing, right?
Yep.
The gospel, the good news is not really changing.
That's right.
But the way that we distribute it, the way that we present it, the way that we publish it, the way that we communicate it, is going to change, honestly, probably forever, right?
Yes. Is the number one, in your experience in talking to pastors, and we'll kind of end with this thought, is the number one, because I'm thinking anytime we're recording something like this, that somebody comes in with massively practical steps that could be executed upon tomorrow. I am just thinking all of the people listening, yes, you who's listening right now, has a laundry list of excuses of why I'm not going to go do this, not only this afternoon or maybe this evening, but tomorrow I'm not going to start it either, or Monday next week. What is the number one objection in your experience of talking to pastors from actually engaging with this framework you laid out?
I think the number one objection is that they don't have time, or that they don't feel like they have anybody. And I would say, with the exception of writing the book, I would consider most of these $15 an hour tasks.
Yes.
And if you're a pastor and you're doing lots of $15 an hour tasks, you are doing the wrong things, because you have a unique voice and you have a unique leadership position. And the sooner that you can delegate these $15 an hour tasks away to volunteers or people on your team, or the better that you are going to be as a leader, as a visionary for your church. And it's also going to, help your leaders and the volunteers fulfill some of their purposes. Maybe you have another little Justin somewhere waiting to blossom, right?
That's right.
They can take their unique skill sets and use it for the kingdom.
That's right. And the good news is the Justin that has already blossomed gave you something at the beginning of this podcast that could save you 4 hours a week. And so time being the number one objection, that doesn't surprise me. That's what I would have answered. That's what I expected you to say. We have something for you that can buy back 4 hours at least per week. And so I would be really honored and love if you went over to Ministry Pass and check that out to see if that can buy you the time you need to actually start executing on these 7 steps. Justin, thank you so much for all the time that you gave us, and even more for coming in with practical steps that all leaders listening to this podcast can take. Ministry leaders and pastors, we love investing into that community. I just need to know, what's your favorite social media in 2022?
It's the same one that was in 2012, which is Twitter.
Ooh. Yep. My favorite people on earth say Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, you got to get on Twitter. It's not too late. There's so much gold that happens there. From the water cooler conversations to the laughs, Twitter's humor is unrivaled for me, whether that's sports, all aspects of my life. But it's also a great way to connect with people. And so Nils and I encourage this all the time. If you want to connect with Justin, like actually have a conversation with him, have a conversation with Nils or I, or anybody that we've had on this podcast, Twitter is one of the best ways that you can do that. And you can always reach out to us. Let us know your thoughts on Twitter. Also, if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, now is your time to do that. This podcast is brought to you by our company called Amplify Social Media. They edit it. They make all the clips. They do everything. So no matter where you are watching this, we give all the credit to the team that works so hard behind the scenes. But yeah, subscribe. That helps this conversation get in front of more church leaders that are looking to how to leverage their ministry on social media. Until next time, my name is Aaron. We were joined today by Justin Trapp. Thank you, Justin, for being on the podcast, and we'll catch you again on the next episode.